Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unfolding the Soul. Today, my guest is Sally. She has been with me on the Discord for probably over 3 years now, and we got to experience each other in each other's journey and look at where we are now, 3 years later. So, Sally wants to talk about uh, becoming who she is, what that means. So yeah, Sally, what does becoming, what is it? What does that mean, that process?
I think trying to figure out who we are and what our place is and how to be the best at who we are and what our place is one of the things that drives people towards these internet groups, and that's why I picked this topic. So I think it's a lot of the undertone of a lot of you and me having a dialogue together for so long. And I also think it is the worthwhile thing that makes the other worthwhile things functional. It has to be a curation of the self to an extent, or you don't grow. And you have to be willing to let some things grow and pick up new things and look at who you are and who you want to be. And it's physical, it's mental, it's spiritual, and it's the thing that affects all your relationships, and it affects your impact on the world.
Mm-hmm. And how does that manifest in your life?
I've been trying to pull myself together, at least very specifically this last year. I've been trying to pull the disparate elements of myself together in a really bigger way, and it's a lot of maturing. I remember really specifically as a teenager, I had different groups of friends, and I thought, oh, when I'm with these friends, I'm like this, and when I'm with these friends, I'm like this, and when I'm with my family, I'm like this. And I thought that was such a cool thing about myself that I could do that. And then as I got older, I was like, wow, that was just awful. And slowly I have been able to kind of pull those things together. Sometimes it's worked out really well, and sometimes it hasn't, because when you're being curated in your interactions, some people are going to like it more than when you're not. And it's not good for them or you either way, whether they like it or don't like it. And learning how to become all of myself at once has been very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to do it with more grace than I once did, but I had to do it, right? I had to do it without any grace for a long time to be able to do it with grace. And it was more important to do it rough than not to do it, because it was like I was never becoming a full person, trying to embody pieces of myself for other people's comfort. Because one, you actually are undermining your own confidence in the world when you do that, and confidence in other people, and you're not trusting other people. And sometimes other people aren't trustworthy, but you have to do it anyway, because you don't give them a chance to become themselves.
Mm.
And so that's been kind of a rough lesson.
So there's a real moral dimension to it for you, where
Mm-hmm.
like
And
like it's connected to love in some sense, right? Like
yeah, this
properly
isn't
love.
in your face or something. This isn't like being like, you're fat, Sue. Like, I don't know a Sue that I can think of, so that's why I use that word. But like, it's not about that. But when you are having a conversation with somebody and they say something and you want to say a thing, and you know, or well, you think you know, because you don't really know, but you think you know how they would react if you said the thing that you really thought and you were sure of. So you don't. And you say a completely, like, with them, with their worldview, confirming thing instead of the real thing intentionally because you're trying to make your life easier. And you might say, oh, it makes their life easier. We all just want to get along. No, no, you've just undermined their confidence and you've gave them a false perspective of the world. And maybe they wouldn't be like that. And you've robbed yourself of your confidence in them. And then you do that 7 or 8 or 900 times. And then you don't trust anybody. You don't believe, you don't have confidence in anybody else. And I don't think there's a good half measure to that. Like there are times, like somebody has Alzheimer's, you don't probably need to tell them that their husband's dead again for the 14th time that day. It's probably fine to not. Little kids, you don't tell them, oh yeah, Ukraine's at war. Why would you do that? But with full grown adults, for the most part, if they're directly asking you, and you're not even bringing it up, but they're directly asking you, even if you know they won't like the answer, you're kind of obligated to either say really outrightly, I don't want to tell you, or I'm not going to tell you, or the truth. You need to tell them either you don't want to talk about it or the truth on all uncomfortable subjects. Do not tell them, oh, yes, you're always right. It's great. Don't tell them that. It's awful to do that.
Mhm.
At least that's what I've come to think over a long period.
So you're making a connection to trust there and confidence. Do you mean confidence in the ability to confide, or do you also
confidence in other people to be real people? Like you have to be a real person to get confidence in other people to be real people. And if you aren't doing that, you're not leaving yourself the option to know if anybody else is a real person.
And maybe that's what we're afraid of, to find out that they're not.
Oh yeah, because some people aren't. Some people will hold it against you and be turds, and you have to let them do that. Like you have to, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm. So there's an element of sacrifice, of taking on the weight as a way to honor the other person.
Yeah, yeah. You have to go out in faith and like see how you'll be received in the clear light of day, or you won't know. And sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's beyond amazing. Like, and you don't know that that's possible if you don't do it, and if you don't take that risk to like be your whole self as much as you possibly can. And that's not selfishness, right? Like I'm not saying only do what you want or only talk about what you want. That's not what I'm saying. That's like a different thing. But I mean, it is in a way because doing like becoming who you are is selfish, but like in the best way. It's because you're a child of God. And if you're living up to your full potential, and if that full potential is a little bit extreme, then reality should be getting you with other people that want that. And if it's not, you maybe need to move who you're. I think about a lot of relationships I pursued in high school, like especially with other women. Like there's one there was one girl that like rode horses and was like tall and she was strong, and I was like, that's the kind of friend I want. And I was obsessed. Like sometimes like was like, she'll be my friend. And she had a bunch of sisters and I wanted to be her friend so bad. And she's just always busy. And it just never happened. And I ignored her little sister, like purposefully. Like, I was always like, why are you trying to hang around me, little kid? And I was trying to be friends with the cool girl in my mind. And then when I quit that, now I'm like super friends with her little sister, and her little sister is way more into books, and her little sister is into the subjects that I like. And I feel awful that I didn't pay attention to her when I was in high school. But like it's like a classic high schooler problem. So I can't feel that bad. I was a stupid high schooler at the time. But I see that mirrored in a lot of other places. I had certain sergeants in the army who like, I was like, that sergeant is my I want him to be my mentor. And then I had other dorky sergeants that really paid attention to what was going on with me and really tried for me. And I didn't care about them at the time. And then later I was like, oh, crud. That was the guy who was really trying to help us. Like he was trying to be there for soldiers. He was trying to go the extra mile. He was trying to get us on good tracks for our career development. And that other sergeant who I thought was so cool was just there to punch the clock and go home.
So
And it's
that sounds
yeah,
like a wavelength that you're not picking up on. It's like
yeah. Well,
you're just not seeing part of what's happening.
and when you're putting on fractions of yourself instead of becoming your whole self, like those are two, like the things I talked about, those were like two different identities. I had this like tough cowgirl mentality, and I thought this one girl like embodied that, and I was really excited about it. And I did not pay attention and be generally kind to who was interested in the things that I was interested in because I got fixated on a fraction of myself. And then a similar thing happened uh probably 2 to 3 years later, at one of my positions, because I had a lanky, what I thought was cool sergeant, and I had a short, dorky, what I thought was nerd sergeant, and I didn't want anything to do with nerd sergeant, and he was the one really trying. And I had not integrated, and I think I had a similar thing in high school. Um,
Well,
there was
we'll
a
go
very
over that. Maybe we can start from the start, and then I'll bring it back to this angle. Um, so we're talking about becoming, and in some sense, we're talking about becoming in the context of what do we pay attention to? Who are we when we pay attention? Are we a whole? So yeah, what's the earliest memory where that is a relevant thing?
I have a hard time pinning that down. But the fracturing of my identity between what people wanted me to be and myself, and then not even necessarily what people wanted me to be, but what I was certain people wanted me to be, because I don't know that what I was certain people wanted me to be was what people wanted me to be. Yeah, I don't know. I was watched by a lot of different families growing up. And like, I'm really lucky because they were very good families. But I remember from like a young age, mom telling me, because my primary care like babysitter from when I was 0 to 3 was this one family. Um, and I remember mom telling me that I thought I was one of them and I wanted to be one of them. And she would say it nice, but I don't feel like she meant it that nice. And it was just an unfortunateness of my mom working, like that's what happened. And it was like difficult on me not to go back there. Um, yeah. So like 3, since I was 3.
So what
Um,
happened that you couldn't go back there? Is that?
my mom changed what school she was working at.
Mhm.
Also, the 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 mom who was watching me never babysit anybody that wasn't her relative anymore.
Mhm.
This is just too hard.
So you feel you carried that with you?
Oh yeah, I'm a mess about it, and I didn't notice it for a long time, and I started noticing it again after my son was born, and I took him to uh, meet her once, and I could go visit her, but it's so hard. Anyway, I didn't mean to get sad. That wasn't the plan. Um,
Well, it's fine to be sad.
yeah,
I'm just trying to, I guess,
yeah.
get a picture of what is the thing that she provided that you miss so much.
Um, I think she had the feminine in the home,
And
and
that's
they were like, at least in my child's mind, they were very authentically and too standardly um Western rural, red barn, white picket fence, um the things my family hadn't quite gotten figured out and could have, but hadn't. um
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Well, so that's the thing that you picked up on when you were 3 years old.
I think so. I mean, I'm just generally having resentment that I wasn't actually part of that family, which,
Hmm.
like, it wasn't like I disliked my parents, right? It was just confusing and frustrating.
So do you feel like that's maybe where the split started happening, where there was an aspect of
I mean, you can't go much before three. You don't remember it. I
Mhm.
don't really remember three perfectly. I remember the residual effects of being three.
Mhm.
Like, I remember a longing to be living a different life a little bit. And then deciding that I could have pieces of these different little lives when I visited different people. And then putting that into, I have a piece of this life at this school, I have a piece of this life at that school, I have a piece of this life at this job, I have this thing to embody at this job, and not ever trying to integrate that well. Like, yeah. And then also just not being okay with who I was completely. I had big periods of time where I didn't want people to think of me as an artist. I had a period of time where I very intentionally focused on dropping my South Dakota accent because I didn't want people to think I was ignorant. Um, I certainly didn't want people to view me as a weak girl. That was something I just found gross. Um, and so, like, there were always these parts of myself I was finding disdain for because of how I imagined other people to view them. And it was very silly. Like, it was not helpful to me. It was not like, I had two kids in high school who loved Lord of the Rings. I also loved Lord of the Rings. We were the Lord of the Rings nerds. And they invited me to, when it came out on VHS, to come over, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go with my friends. And I had some friends that I hung out with, and they weren't like the cool kids, but they were like the tough kids in my mind. And I'm like, no, I'm a tough kid. I'm not gonna go hang out with the Lord of the Rings nerds and betray my tough kid friends. And, like, my friends that I hang out with, they would not have cared if I had went over to their house and watched. They would not have cared. They did not want to watch Lord of the Rings with me. not really. They did, but they didn't want to. And like I could have went and enjoyed it and like embraced people who were interested in the subject, but because they were preppy, because they were from town, because they were not what I envisioned myself as the ideal, I viewed it as a betrayal of this ideal that I had generated, which was a dumb ideal, really. Like it just was. But I couldn't get past it. Like, and
Mhm.
that I did that a, a quite a number of times to myself with my relationships, and I shouldn't have. And that's and I'm happy to talk about the effects, right? Because it's hard to talk about your internal dialogue, and it's hard to talk about gaining enough confidence to let your inside world and your outside world unify in an effective and beautiful way. Because it's not like being content with the inside world, right? It's not like you should. We have the friend that says you shouldn't indulge every thought, and he's absolutely right. You shouldn't indulge every thought. It's not about giving into your craven instincts, but it is about paying attention to what you love inside, like, and like merely being proactive, really taking a conscious effort to see yourself clearly. And if that isn't what you really want to be being, then actively practice not being that instead of actively practice presenting not being that. Because presenting not being that is not as good as actually just not being that. Like, yeah.
Okay, so there was a lot there. Um, so the first thing that I'm interested in is this ideal that you speak of, right?
Right.
Was it one ideal or was it many ideals that were contingent upon circumstance? Like,
Yeah, once it was many, and I'm working hard for it to be one.
okay, so what I'm imagining is you have a situation and then maybe that's scary or something, right? Like maybe going with the nerds is something that you haven't done yet or something, right? And it's like you're uncertain of, well, the public image of that. And so is that ideal that you make, is that something that you used to avoid, or was it something that you were trying to achieve before the situation presented?
I'm not completely sure. Um, I think, like, as far as high school went, I thought I needed to maintain certain relationships, basically, like, for security reasons. And I didn't, not really at all. I would have been fine. And yeah, so maybe it's just being scared. That's possible.
So can you say a little bit more about the security reasons? Like what was
Oh, I had homeschooled from third grade to seventh grade. Eighth grade, I went to a little rural school on one side of the river, and I thought like I knew some kids there. But then when I went to high school, I went to the high school on the other side of the river because the roads that way were paved, and the roads towards where the kids I went to eighth grade school with weren't paved. And my cousins were going to a Christian boarding school. So like I didn't know how to deal with it very well. And when I first was there, I had several people that I thought were going to be my friends, and I let them be my friends for a while, and didn't work out. And I felt like they had got real mean. I'm not sure that they did, looking back, right? That was teenage me. I felt like they had got real mean. And then I was faced with a situation at a small school. All the people that talked to them wouldn't talk to me, and all the people that didn't talk to them wouldn't talk to me. And there was this very small group left. And the very small group that was left, I was like, fine, these are my friends now. And we didn't even necessarily have things in common. And I didn't necessarily want to do what they were doing. But I just took it as like a loyalty stance and like, no, these are the kids that would sit with me and be with me. So now they're my friends. And I did that till like as far as my direct class, till the end of high school. Because these three kids would still talk to me after the little kerfuffle with what I designated as the mean girls at the beginning of the freshman year. I was their friend for the rest of the time, which not that they're bad people, like they're not, but they had their own interests that weren't mine. But I tagged along for their events basically in spite my own self-interest, just like full-heartedly, because I thought that was what loyalty was. And I don't think they even necessarily noticed. I think I just kind of confused them, but that's what I thought you were supposed to do. And I should have got over it. I should have reconciled with the girls who I thought were being mean to me. I should have allowed opportunity to come in at the times that it did, but I would purposefully snub what I deemed as pretty girls from like then forward. And
Mm-hmm.
it was ridiculous because maybe I was one, but I didn't know because I was so jilted that I couldn't associate with like other feminine women because I was pissed at them. And that was pathetic. That was pathetic. If I had ever been giving anybody a chance, and like if I would have been like trying to be something other than tough, it may have been available to me. And I won't know. Anyway, and what's crazy is like since I've been back living in my state, one of them stopped to talk to me like we've never had any problem in the world. And I'm like, what was wrong with me that for like 3 years I didn't talk to this girl? Like it's just silly. It's silly. I probably still have more in common with the three girls who I thought had ruined my life in high school than probably the other three kids that I ended up spending the majority of my high school time with. What's up with that? People are dumb. I don't know.
Well, there's different ways that you can have things in common, right? Like maybe the commonality that you shared was being an outcast, or because life has different ways of bringing us together, right? And sometimes these are positive reasons, right? But sometimes people flee and then they end up at the same place. So, but yeah. So you keep mentioning, well, that there's this new perspective, right? Where you're now looking back and maybe I didn't need that, or maybe you did need something. So how do you decide whether you needed something, right? Like
That's a good one. Um, Somehow in here is what Peterson says about having friends that want the best for you.
Mhm.
And I would add to that, or at least are interested in seeing you clearly. There's that, and finding friends at your aptitude or finding friends in domains that you actually want to be in. Because like the friends I ended up having often weren't bad, but they weren't in a domain that I wanted to be in. Like they're interested in cars or video games or just not domains that I was interested in. And I wasn't even trying to have friendships with people interested in my interests. Anyway,
So did you
Peterson,
cultivate your interest by your own?
hmm. Yeah, I think so. I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time not really talking to anyone and mostly talking to myself. And that is an easy way to live in a fictional world and not see things clearly.
Mhm.
And I did probably up until I was 24, mostly that. Maybe not even 24, maybe longer than that. Up until 2010, up until like the spring of 2010, I mostly lived mentally in my own inner world. And like sometimes I would have instances of like making real connections with people, but majority of what was going on for me was just internal. And when things are only internal, I think they're often very fictional. Like you can't see yourself clearly through your own eyes. Um, not necessarily. And yeah, you need that, and like you need other people. And I had just decided I didn't need other people, and it was bad. It was bad.
And so that leads to you presenting yourself in a certain way.
Right,
Well,
right. People can't be your friend if you're always trying to guess and put yourself out in a certain way. Yeah.
and how do you decide how to present yourself? Is that by telling yourself a story about what people want?
I don't know. Maybe.
Because I imagine, right, and this is also from my experience, that when when you're younger, right, you adapt in some sense to what's required of you, right? Like you go with the flow. Um,
Ah,
you,
okay. I
you're
think
not.
I see. Yes, because when you're younger, you should do that to an extent. You should adapt to what's required of you. In order to do that, you need to be accepting input.
Mhm.
And the short out is when you get so convinced that you know that you don't risk finding out what the other person actually thinks by talking to them or even listening to them, because I find often if you're not willing to talk to someone, you're also not willing to listen to them. Like I wasn't even listening to people. I was like deaf and mute because I was so worried about the extra and so convinced there was no help for me. So convinced there was no like I had no confidence in adults to be able to handle the truth about anything. And like it wasn't even just like the bad or anything. It was just like no confidence that telling adults anything that was really going on would be helpful. And then I was robbing myself of any help or advice or understanding. And like a huge amount of your sensory abilities come from older people when you're young. And I was robbing myself of that
Mhm.
by just not having any confidence in that.
So did you feel misunderstood then?
Well, no, I wasn't even trying to be understood.
Well, but I'm there's a reason why you got to that place, right? Like
Mm.
there's a, I guess, a disappointment that happens somewhere where you make the decision, well, like that's not the way, because that's bad for me.
Yeah, no, it was struggles with my parents. I'm trying not to point fingers because it's like at some point you have to get over it, right?
Hmm.
Um, I struggled. I think they did the best they could, but there were gaps. So
Yeah, like we don't have to point fingers, but I want to point the finger at the spot that was hurt, right? Like so because there's, I guess there's, when there's a disappointment, there's many reactions. Well, maybe there's a couple basic reactions, right? Like there's
yeah,
an outward reaction, right? There's an ignoring that it happened reaction, and there's a retreat, and you chose, well, you retreated, um,
yeah.
into your stories. So, well, I'm trying to get an image of what's the demon that's so scary that put you there?
I'm trying to disassociate it from an individual. I'm not sure that it can be, but I'm loath to talk about the individual so pointedly on an internet connection.
Okay, so but you definitely have a feeling. Uh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I know. I to this day don't know how to fix it. I've had uh pop psych people tell me, just end that relationship. And I'm like, no, not gonna do that with my immediate family. Sorry.
Mhm.
But it'd probably feel great for a while. um yeah, no, I have problems relating with some of my family members, and they survived what they could survive, and I think they did better than their parents, and that was the best they could do, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm trying to just accept that.
So let's create the track to this point. So there's you get this ideal or this taste of an ideal when you're really young, and then there's this disappointment on the other side, and that creates a disconnection from what you're participating in and what you think you truly needed, looking back at least. Um, so now you end up in high school. Are there any major events that you still want to capture there?
Not really. There was, yeah, I don't know. I'm not as obsessed with high school as some people are. Like, almost any show that's about high school, I would just rather not watch it. I don't think I had real transformation until way, way later.
So maybe give an example of the transformation you did have. So what was the way that you did grow?
Um, I tried real hard in like 2005 and 2006, a year or two after I was in the service and had spent a year away from home, um, to come to terms with some things. Didn't really happen like with some of my family. Like I was trying to just directly address what I considered source of a bunch of problems, and it didn't come to fruition with who I thought it should come to fruition with. And because it didn't, I kind of quit on that and just didn't try. And then I got in an absolutely terrible relationship because I thought the person was honest. And then 4.5 years later, I found out very much the opposite. Um, because I thought the only reason someone would tell you a bad story was because they were trying to be honest. And no, that is not necessarily the case. Um, Sometimes people will tell you a bad story because they're completely lying and they just enjoy its power over you. And in 2010, um, I discovered a bunch of things in quick succession that led to the end of my first marriage. Um, and there was no recoup. My ex-husband had a fake dead child. And I even attempted marriage counseling after finding out he had a fake dead child. But if you won't talk about why the child is fake and why you had the need for a fake dead child, or why you're not from the state you said you were from, and so on and so forth, there really isn't anything there. And I had to let that go. And that was part of when I realized, because after that was one of the first times where I decided to tell people exactly how it was, and it was totally horrible, right? It was horrible, and it was rambly, and it was crazy, and I was so stressed, and I think I was 26, and it went so well. All the people that I was scared of, I wrote this crazy letter to, and they almost all, no, all of them were so kind. Um, and I couldn't believe it. And that's when I realized I would not have had to have been hiding myself. Um, but I had never given them a chance. Like, I had never given them a chance to be supportive, to be helpful, to be good advice. I'd never done it. And then after that, at least I knew things could be different. It's like, even when you discover something doesn't mean you can really play it through right away. And like 2010 was when I started trying to tell the truth just about everything. And it was ugly for a while because like I just felt like I had to forefront the worst of the worst to everyone all the time for a while. And then I kind of was able to like chill out later. And I've been working to do it with more grace, but it was kind of like 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 when you think about teenagers like between 15 and 19, when they have like struggles with their parents and they have fights and they have this figuring out their identity versus their parents' identity, don't feel like I did that. And because I waited like 10 years to do that, it was way, well, maybe not 10 years, but like maybe it was 10 years because if I should have started 15, I don't know. But because I waited to do that, it was like emotional botulism. Like it would have been like understandable and reasonable at 15, but at 25 it was pretty, it's like not learning how to wear makeup when you're like 14, and then when you start wearing it at 22 you have no idea what you're doing. And it doesn't make sense that you have no idea what you're doing, so you stand out as looking like an idiot. Because if you were 15 with bad makeup, people would be like, well, yeah, they're 15, they don't know what they're doing. But at 25 with bad makeup, people are like, what is happening? What is wrong with you? Yeah.
Well, there's people at 45 that do that problem, right? Like it's not only it can be
Yeah.
way
Well,
worse.
this is maybe cultural delayed maturity. And maybe I got it hard because I wouldn't risk angering my parents. And I should have, because even my parents would have been more okay with me than I thought they would. Um, Especially my dad. My dad's amazing. Um, and but um you don't get to know, you know? And like I didn't want to do crazy things. Like I didn't want to go to parties, but I did want to do things like, and I should have at least voiced it whether it happened or not. I wanted to go to a different school, I wanted to have different jobs. Um just a bunch of things I should have voiced. And I didn't, because I wanted to live up to some kind of ideal that I don't even know was my parents' ideal. It was just the ideal that I thought was my parents' ideal. And that leaves you not being able to discover an ideal of who you want to be because you're busy living out fictional other people's ideals that you don't even know what they are because you never actually asked them.
So you left straight up out of high school into the army, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, you did get away from your family then.
No, it's not really getting away when you're told to do that.
Yeah, okay, but you're getting into a new relation, right? Into a new hierarchy. You're getting into a place with a lot of structure. Um,
Yeah. Structure is a cheat because it allows you to not grow.
mhm. But I assume that that was something that you wanted, right? Like that actually was
But
a
the
benefit.
structure,
Yeah.
no, it was a cop out. I picked the easy way out joining the army. I joined the army to not argue with my mom because she wanted me to join the army.
Hmm. right. Like I'm not talking about the motivation, right? Like I get that there was this tension and well,
I
yeah,
didn't.
maybe we should hold a moment around that situation, right? So
My,
you're
my first enlistment, I did not in any way use to its full potential, and I'm quite sad about it because there were wonderful things and wonderful tools presented to me and wonderful people, and I had good units, and I was just embittered that I had done something that I viewed to be against my will,
Mhm.
and I was just waiting it out because like part of my coping was, oh, it's only as long as high school, I can get through this too. And I did not use things to their full potential. And I just used it as a prolonged childhood in some ways. And like, yeah, I did really serious things. I tried to do a good job. I've always tried to do a good job at anything that I'm doing. Um, I did come out of it with some okay relationships, but in some ways it was just a giant procrastination to becoming myself. Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. So you're talking about having this image of what is expected of you with your parents, right? And that was maybe not explicit, but in the army it is, right? Like in the army there is an explicit expectation.
Yeah, the army was easier because everything was laid out. But see, you think everything's laid out, but not really everything's laid out. But I was trying to do all the laid out things to like an extreme, which actually was kind of a detriment in some ways because I missed the point of them because I just wanted to push the button and move on often. There were a few sergeants that pushed me past that, and I'm very grateful to them.
So so you get this break, right, when you're effectively betrayed by your husband. And and then you you take a turn around, you take a turn around in telling the truth. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
does that also come with a turnaround in that mentality from away from pushing the button, or is that something that takes a while?
Not right away. Initially, I sought to push the buttons faster and harder.
Hmm.
I thought the answer was in just getting it done, and I tried to re-enlist active duty, and as a huge ego blow, they would not take me because the army actually takes way less 25 and 26-year-olds than it will 19-year-olds. And like the first time you join the army, it's easy, right? Second time, it's much harder. And so I could not join active duty. And that was kind of devastating because that had always been my backup plan. And then my backup plan fell through, and like I just wasn't wanted. And that was just, oof, that was hard. And then I ended up going to Colorado, living with one of my aunts, which was good. Um, and I worked for Time Warner Cable and had to learn. I did tech support on the phones, and I had to learn conflict resolution. I like that was I applied to so many jobs, and that was the job I could get. I was scared to work behind a cash register. So like that was the job I could get. But it in some ways it was my worst job and my best job because I learned a ton. Um, and then I rejoined the Colorado National Guard, and I sought to be more hula than I ever been, and I fantasized about going active duty until I finally got orders and went active duty and really used the available tools and resources that the service can give you well. I bought a house on a VA loan. I got my college going again. I did a critical thinking extra course that was available. Like I volunteered for all the things that time. Like I was just using it. Like I should have used it the whole time, but I never had. Um, but the Guard is not active duty, and there are politics to the Guard, which I was not acute enough to play yet. and it did not work out. And then I ended up doing civilian contracting, which worked out, but it wasn't what I wanted at the time, which I like don't know that I should have wanted it, right? I don't know that I should have wanted to be enlisted again, but it was like the path that I could see clearly because I had been so close to it that I just went after it because it was a thing to go after. Yeah.
So that's two motivational streams, right? Like one is what is expected, and then the other one is what can I see, and well, you
Yeah.
need to take a step back in a sense to see more than what's immediately in front of you.
Yeah. A major moment for me in becoming myself, as a civilian contract. So when I was active duty, I spent most of my time in Korea, which is not considered a deployment. It's considered a deployment on paperwork. Like I qualify for the deployment stuff, but other soldiers do not consider that a deployment. So what I faced in the Guard was discrimination basically against me because I didn't have a combat patch. It's hard. And then I kept getting freaking promoted, which this sounds like the most ridiculous thing, but like I didn't want to be promoted. Like almost none of my no, the only promotion I ever wanted was specialist. I didn't want my sergeant. I didn't want my staff sergeant. But the Guard, when they have slots to fill, they want you to take them. So there was a slot to fill. I qualified. They wanted me to take it. And I took it on the condition I was going to get a deployment as soon as possible. And then they gave it to someone else immediately. So there was a staff sergeant, which is like the second rank of being in charge of people with no deployment experience. And it was not good. And so I had this like, if only I had had a deployment, I'd really have things figured out thing in my head. So as a civilian contractor, when a deployment came up, I went. And I was operating radar out of a plane, which has been something like after I had re-engaged with the service stuff, I was like, well, that's what I want to do because it's awesome. And it was a very short deployment and like very whatever in my mind now, like because like it's not hardcore to push buttons in an airplane, whatever. But I did it. I actually accomplished it. Like I set out to do it in basically late 2010, early 2011. I set out to do it and I did it. And I'm looking out that window and I realize if I do this, this is all I'll do. Do I want to do this? Because there are people who make that their career. And I didn't want to. I got my goal. I got what I had pursued. And I didn't want to. And I had a number of reasons. One of them was the husband that I'm married to now. But also I had found out, because after my divorce, I oriented myself in the pursuit of cold hard cash in some ways. And I did that not because necessarily I wanted money, but I wanted to do some goals for my family that I thought required money. And I had found out basically right before my deployment that money wasn't the issue. And I was sure money was the issue for so long. I'm like, well, if we just had enough money, we wouldn't have these problems. And then I had found out right before this deployment, money was not the issue. And I had to reevaluate everything. And yeah, didn't really want to just operate radar for the rest of my life, even if it was out of a cool old airplane. Like, didn't want to do it. And then I started re-engaging with more of my artistic self. And then 2 years later is when I went to art school again, because I had tried once and failed, and then I went back. And I'm not 100% sure I should have went to art school, but it's just like I had to take a different direction.
So you achieved the goal and realized you didn't want it. Was that the first time that you really achieved the goal that you set out to?
Um, maybe that specifically. Maybe that specifically. In the guard, I had attempted a big goal like that, and there was this program for women to take a more active field role, and I didn't really understand the program. I just knew I didn't want to work at Time Warner Cable anymore, and so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I didn't physically prepare as much as I should have, but I did get to where I was passing a level higher on the physical tests, and I was very excited about it. And it has a 7-day qualification period, and I made 5 of them. And we would do these ruck marches where a ruck march is where you carry weight in a backpack and then walk. And we do these ruck marches where you didn't know how long the ruck march would be. But at any time you wanted to, you could sit down beside the side of the road and they'd come pick you up in a van and you could basically fly home. And on the 5th day, earlier in that day before the ruck march, I had dropped a large beam about 2 inches from someone else's ankle. And I had realized everybody who was doing well was about 6 foot tall and been an athlete their whole life. And it was not me. I like to read books. And so I kind of reached my maximum physically, and I finished that ruck march and I weighed in. And then I said to the guy, I'm like, I'm gonna withdraw. And he's like, oh no, we're medically discharging you, because if you withdraw, you can never come back. If you're medically withdrawn, you can go and work out and get more fit and come back for the next one. And so I was really proud that I made the rest of that ruck march, but I had no skin on my feet. I had blistered from the sole of my foot to the top, like to the bottom of my toes, and from the sole of my foot past my ankle on both feet. And so like I met my maximum physically, and that was kind of a ego killer because I didn't know prior to that what my maximum physically was. And so kind of directly after meeting my maximum physically, I took to I was like, oh, okay, I'm not a physical person, so what am I? And then I did, well, I could be a competent, smart person, basically. And I pivoted and I took a critical thinking course and I got some career stuff done. And then I ended up going to Washington, D.C. and working for the company that I was working with when I deployed. But like, you're not just those things. Like, you're not just a physical tough person. You're not just like a smart technical person. And like in my case, like I'm not just an artist. I'm actually an in-between of all those things. And that's what I wasn't engaging with. Well, I was engaging with these fractions of what I could be. And it just took a long time to be okay with my full self. But those are like the major, like exploring those roads are like the major turning points. I don't know, maybe I'll get older and I'll look at that like isolating and playing them through as a positive. But I wish I would have tried to integrate sooner now. Like I wish I would have tried to be those things together now, because that seems to be the path that's going to turn out good. And I'm much happier now.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then the question is, maybe do you think you could have?
I don't know. And maybe that's fair. Yeah.
Because there's this element of black and white thinking that's all over the place, right? Like, oh, I'm either this or I'm that, or that's
Yeah.
okay and that's not okay. And then there's also a sense of hyper focus on one aspect. And so I guess my question is, what does integration look like for you? Like you said you went to art school, right? Like art is more.
So
open?
When I got out of doing my old job, I thought I won't have to do paperwork again. I won't have to do technical stuff again. And I started doing the art stuff. And then I did the art stuff, had my first kid, and I thought, okay, I'm done with work. I'm done with business. Now I'm a stay-at-home mom who does art stuff. And in the last, like, especially the last year, but really since we've been talking, since I got on Bridges, I've started to put these fractionist pieces of my life together, and I started being more engaged with our budget and using what I knew about like just technical stuff so that we could do, like, my husband and me could do that better. And that helped everything. So then I'm re-engaging with my analytical side in a very practical way of like, what are we spending? How do we spend it better? What are our interest rates? And like, I didn't want to do that stuff, but I can. And then my art stuff, I thought I was done with having to work on computers and stuff. And I tried galleries and I hated it. And I didn't want to do that. And now I've found, oh, you know what? I can edit videos because I edited videos before. And I started doing my YouTube channel. And then with my YouTube channel, I'm sharing my story and I'm sharing the thoughts behind all of my art. And like, actually, my story and my thoughts behind all of my art might be more important than my art. Like, as much as I want to be an egocentric artist and like, look at this amazing thing I made, actually the story about why I would want to make that and is probably as valuable as the art itself. And like, I even have that the herb statue that I made about the portion of myself that either is in charge or is ignored. And I'm trying to, when I do those, I'm being silly, but I'm also talking to myself. And like, that's real too. Like, I am talking to myself. I'm not just saying, oh, it's art time. Oh, it's business time. I'm saying, what does it look like when I put those pieces together? And I realize now, like, I'm going to have a serious business portion of my life, even if I am an artist, and like, probably so I can be an artist. And so that's cool. And I can be an artist, and that does not mean I am wishy-washy or flaky, and people don't have to think of me that way. And if they do, it's none of my business because you don't get to control what other people think, which that's a big bridge to gap, you know? Gap to bridge. Yes. Anyway.
So yeah, so you're in some sense, I guess the story, the importance on the story is the thing that is integrating for you in
Yeah.
some, right? Yeah.
Well, and also accepting that I'm a woman. I've always been one. I've never been a tiny man. And like, I don't mean in the gender dysphoric blah blah blah, right? But I do mean it is worthwhile to pursue woman things. Like, it is worthwhile to enrich a home. It is worthwhile to have a kid. And it doesn't have to hollow you out. It actually, I've found it very rarefying. And I think that's one of the reasons I've come together, is because looking at what I want for my son helps me see the me that I could have been being this whole time more clearly. And I know for sure now, oh yes, I want this, not that. Oh yes, I want this, not that. Over and over and over. And I know it. And it's just evident. And also, I am way more capable of doing the work in either the presence of my loved ones or for their good than I am for myself, which I think is common to women. So, and like through younger people, I'm more complete. Um, it's like before you have a kid, you're the last chain link, and then suddenly you get in the middle and you can see how you can hold weight. And I actually have been pleasantly surprised because I moved back home for a bunch of reasons. One of them, so Wallace would be around more family. And something I had not expected is now I'm able to be here for other kids. Like I came here so other people could be here for Wallace, but I'm able to be here for other kids and getting to know my family members who are teenagers and who are 8 and who are 9 has given me immense empathy for myself at those ages. And that's been huge because some of the stuff you hold against yourself as a teenager is just ridiculous if you know any teenagers. And like as soon as you know a teenager, you're like, oh, okay. And like you can do it. You can suddenly just be like, okay, I see why that happened. And you can just move on. And that's been amazing. And that's something I wouldn't have got to experience because I don't think teenagers who weren't my family members would have done it. It needed to be my family members. And that's what really has helped. Yeah.
So when you went into art school, did you have a sense of the way that you were going to use art like you're doing it now? Like,
No, I thought I would pursue this. I thought I would pursue the classical tradition. I thought I would like find the French cafe with the good conversation, and I was so excited for it. And it wasn't there. I've got that from Discord. Because I had read about it, right? I had read about the Impressionists and different periods of art, and that they would all be in the academy, and then they would meet at the cafe, and they would talk into the night. And I had this, like, just I was just so excited about it, and that's really not was there. But it did give me time because I was intentionally attempting to screw my head on, and that's when I found all the Peterson stuff. So I would work on my projects and listen to Peterson. And I was trying to do a bunch of stuff about getting myself together before I found Peterson. Like from 2010 to 2015, I was trying, but man, fall of 2015, because pretty quickly, it might have been the beginning of 2016, but pretty quickly into like within 8 months of getting into art school, I ended up finding Peterson. And then things just started really clicking. And I could understand what was going on with my professors, but I also just started understanding myself and understanding my pursuits, and it just really started coming together faster and faster. And I'm very glad that that could happen before I had a kid. And in some ways, art school was my preparing to have a kid because I knew I needed the distance from, and I don't know why I knew that, right? But I knew I needed the distance from the military stuff, and I needed the distance from that serious Department of Defense work. I needed distance from it before I had a kid. I don't know that I needed 3 years, but I thought I did at the time. I kind of wish I would have tried to have a kid sooner, because I had this fictional idea that you could be ready, and you'll never be ready. Just have kids at 19. It's fine. You'll never be ready.
so what is the thing that Peterson made you understand that was helpful?
He gave me the language for my own ideas. He gave me the language for the things I was pursuing. The maps of meaning was really helpful. And the what is the other one?
The biblical series or the
No,
personality course?
There's maps and meaning, and then there's another one about emotions. It's not strictly about emotions.
There's a personality course where you
The
can.
personality one, yes. I actually think I had more constructive use of the personality stuff than anything, maybe. The biblical stuff wasn't what I needed. I have a strong foundation in biblical understanding, and I had some of the psychological ideas before Peterson, but the personality lectures and explaining, yeah, it's really hard to put your finger on, right? But I had dealt with panic attacks, and I had been managing those, and I had found somewhere in some off of the shelf pop culture psych book that panic attacks are caused by your physical body not trusting, or your unconscious not trusting your conscious. And so all of Peter's personality stuff goes really deep into that, further than I had been. I had practically figured out some of it just by eating more regularly and like being physically more secure, and like I had taken care of that to an extent. But yeah, the personality lectures and understanding narcissism and understanding, like, I was still trying to understand my ex to some extent, like why you would make up fictional worlds and suck people in. And then just Peterson calling out malevolence, very helpful to me, because there is a line where it is just malevolence, and I need somebody to talk about all those dark things. And like he openly talks about, oh yeah, you can hate your kids. And I needed to have somebody say that, because when you question if things are real, it just makes you feel crazy. Like it just was very helpful. Yeah.
So that's interesting. You question that things are real. Like, is the reason that you question things because you've been betrayed by what you think is real too much, or like
I don't know. I don't know. It's like there's a function to skepticism, right? Like there's a function, like it can be very useful to just assume anybody could be telling you anything for any reason, and you have to just hold that in your mind, because people could just be entirely fake. And that had played out for me, like just completely played out. And so, that was something that I was dealing with. And then Peterson is like, oh, but also they can be completely authentic. And I'm like, are you sure, bro? And then he had like 5 years on it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, you've got a lot of research on it. Okay, yeah. And I don't think I could have taken him seriously in one lecture or two lectures or three lectures, but it was his available consistency over time in volume.
So he was in a sense also exemplifying the thing that you were looking for him to tell you.
I mattered if he was exemplifying it, because anything can be faked for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no one lecture. And like also too, like I never hero worship Peterson, because I don't know if I have hero worship available for me right now. Like because my confidence in humanity just was so freaking low. So like I never hero worshipped him. But it was interesting, and I could hear it out. And then it was really, really consistent. And that's what was good for me. And actually, even if you're really paying attention, even his little downfall with his illness time and then coming back is actually really consistent looking, because if you've watched and like listened and watched, because if you see his physique, there are times where he looks sicker than not sick in the past. Like he looks in health and out of health in the past. And then also he talks about his family having struggles with depression and having struggles with different things. And so like he played out his own story like in a real way. And then the availability of his family members to show up confirms him in a way that doesn't happen for a lot of public presenting people. And I liked that. Yeah, and it was very useful to me to have that whole story play out, because it's not just the historical information, it's not just the studies, it's not just what he's putting out, but it's the availability of seeing his life in that, and his story and his ups and downs in that. That was just really good for me. Yeah, yeah.
So Peterson also pointed and acknowledged the dark.
Yeah.
So do you think it's important to explore the dark, or do you think it's important to realize it's there? Like, what's your...
You shouldn't pretend, like, you should look at those evil fantasies clearly, at least a little. You shouldn't ruminate on them necessarily, but you should look at them clearly and know what you're capable of. And there are enough people that can't take that. But yeah, there is a difference between people who know what they're capable of and people who do not. And it's kind of like a giant rift in society. There is a canyon between them. In the service, people say the sheep hate the sheepdog because it reminds them that wolves exist. And there are plenty of people that just hate soldiers. They just hate soldiers. And the better a soldier you are, the more they hate you. And yeah, there are going to be some people that just do. And maybe that's just how it has to be, you know? But that's yeah, sorry, I thought that fit in, and now I'm not sure if that fit in. But like Peterson is very okay with like looking at the dark side stuff. And I have been for a while, but I don't know. I like to draw and imagine, and I've done this since maybe before high school. The darker things in my mind, I like to put on paper in a symbolic format so that I can see them separately from myself. And a lot of times I turn them into like fantastical little narratives. But sometimes they're very direct. Sometimes it's just like a person screaming on a page, or like, but like I have a whole narrative about fear. And the narrative about fear, I have I think 3 or 4 iterations, and fear is this giant bear monster. And in one of them, I call it bare naked fear, and the bear monster is skinless, and you can see its muscles and organs. And in another one, it's this creature that had eaten an angel's wing that's pinned to a hill of death, and like, and in another one, it's two-headed, and you can walk in and out of its mouths. And those are all different ways that I had engaged with fear, like how to dealing with it. It was all me grappling with this fear idea. I probably am going to try and turn those into a little thing. Like, actually, I'm only recently properly engaging in my narratives, because I always had this idea of myself as like a very classical artist, and now I'm trying to like, oh wait, I do have these narratives, and I've been trying to do something with them. So yeah.
So does that also keep true for the good side? Are you also putting the good?
I'd like it to. I have more of a need to put the darkness out of me onto the paper. Less of a need to do that with like, oh, I am content today. Like, I don't really have a need to represent contentness in the same way as when you're dealing with grief or fear or anxiety or rage. Like, that's therapeutic to get it out of you and not experience it internally. It's nice to experience it externally and put it on paper and put it away. Um,
Have
I
you
some
tried the good part, like to keep that out?
sometimes I find it's funny, that's where my still life photography comes in. I find pleasantness in the benign sometimes, and sometimes um I'll want a photo. There was one photo of I had cut meat on a cutting board, and then I had some jars and stuff in the sunlight by my stove that I shared on our group text. And like that kind of content, looking at all of the items in life by what they represent, what's going on. And I had actually done that. I have a still life. I have a number of still lifes, which is funny because when it comes to like the deranged, I want to portray it symbolically, right? But when it comes to the good and the whole and the beautiful, I have a desire to portray it very photorealistic, very classical still life. Like, it's the bountiful bowl of fruit with rabbits beside it. Like, and what does that mean, right? That's like the good harvest, the good hunt, and then like if you're lucky, you're putting a Bible in with it, and then you're putting a large jug of wine with it, and maybe there's a fuzzy blanket in the corner by a roaring fire, and it's this invitation to the good life. And I probably have some of those still lifes that I haven't accomplished yet in me. I take photos of them sometimes in my own home, and I have a still life of a layout, which layouts are a thing you do with your equipment and your stuff, but then you find yourself habitually creating new layouts when you're in the service. And so one of them is to lay out everything that will go in your pockets. So your pen, your notebook, your dog tags, your keys, your ID card, and like maybe a piece of gum or cigarettes or whatever is your personal vices. You lay them out by your bed before you go to bed because you've got like 5 hours to sleep and you're gonna get up and get dressed as quickly as possible and have to have all these things. And like with your boots, you tuck the laces on the inside, and like you like basically there's these superstitions that soldiers like do that you wouldn't necessarily have to do, but you start doing them, and there's a beauty to it. There's a beauty to it, and I like those. I like seeing them physically and thinking about what reading the scene means, which is funny because like, yeah, why don't I paint angels, and why don't I paint the goodness of nature, and why, like, trying to think if I ever had.
I what I'm hearing from you, right, is that this, I feel like even though it's in your space and with the things that you work with, right, like your meat and your canned food and whatever, right, that there's a, it's not personal, right, like it's not coming from out of you, but it's what you relate to. So
Yeah,
what
it's funny because the personal mythos of the darker things seems easy symbolically, but the personal mythos of the good seems to come out of realism and evident things for me. Which that's interesting because I don't know that I knew that. Yeah.
We'll talk about that more later, I bet.
Yeah.
So I want to go into this aspect, and maybe that's connecting, because before we started talking, we had a talk about how the organizing the environment changes who you are, or at least who you can be, and how that interfaces with who you're becoming, and that's something that you've started exploring lately. I think also as a consequence of becoming a mom. So yeah, how does that connect to the art and the good and the bad and
I'm trying to allow input, and I'm trying to not get caught up in the specific in the way I used to. Um, for instance, I always thought if I did art, I wanted to do this kind of classical surrealism and very serious work. Like I wanted my work to be taken seriously. And that's a holdover, right? That's a holdover from wanting to be perceived as the tough guy, as wanting to be perceived as, I don't know, competent or capable or something. There's something in that. But there's something in trying to be perceived as tough that's very insecure. It's like if you have to be perceived as tough, you're probably insecure. And I've been encouraged by an art group, Bastions of Beauty, that I was in, that my cartoons are quite good. And when I really take a deep breath and get over myself, I've been doing cartoons longer than any other of my artwork and more consistently than any other of my artwork. And there's no reason I can't enjoy it. And I was always trying to work them up to this other thing. And like, especially during art school, don't engage with cartoons. And it's like most of my best ideas start out as kind of a cartoon form. And I don't know that I'll always stick to cartoons. Like I do really value like the classical way of articulating, but I can't.
can we hold it there? So when you're talking about classical realism, why is that serious and the other parts aren't? Because you're making there some
I don't,
judgment.
I don't know. Yeah, that's why. That's it. That's the only reason. Like judgy pretentiousness that somehow got integrated into my psyche. No idea why. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. And then like just accepting that I'm going to share my story and just accepting basically that I'm going to have fun. And like, it still blows my mind that people like my work with Herb, right? Because I partially just started doing that because I wasn't getting any art done and I just really wanted to make something. And my kid was little and I couldn't have toxic materials everywhere. So what could I do? Oh, I could shove myself in a closet and talk to my statue. That'll work. And I like it. And I think like people like it. And it's went through its bad phases. Like it's getting more enriched all the time. I'm not gonna keep doing something that's bad, but like I just dismissed that part of myself. And I think I do have like I just really like humor. And I would have never wanted to be seen as like the Joker or like the silly person. Like that was the furthest thing from my mind is like being okay with being very silly. Um, but maybe I should have been like maybe I should have been way sooner because a lot of the best things you can learn and the best things you can understand are silly. Like life is bizarre and I do enjoy that. Um, so I'm trying to be more okay with that. Yeah.
So yeah, and then the organizing your environment part. Like you want to get into that a bit?
Um, yeah, maybe. It's hard. it's still hard to realize that that's part of myself. Like, it obviously is, right? It's hard to realize. I started proactively addressing the things that I own. I never really did minimalism, but I watched a lot of minimalism and took on a lot of the mindset and trying to understand, like, and Peterson brings this up too, is like, you might not just be yourself, you also might be your effect on the world. So actually all that junk in your house and those decisions you just haven't dealt with are bad and are negatively affecting you. But then what does that mean and how far can you take that? And like, I've went through my stuff a number of times. I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff, but then I've gotten new stuff. And I still am trying to find a balance. Like, I'd like to be even more organized, but at some point you kind of hit a maximum where you just don't know how to get more organized, especially if you grew up disorganized. Like, it's very difficult. And then you're gonna make purchasing mistakes, and you're gonna make storage mistakes, and you're gonna make wardrobe mistakes. And like, best you can do is deal with them when you realize them, and not worry about it too much. And like, I would say I pared down our belongings by at least a third, if not a half, before our last move. Maybe it was a solid half. It might have been more than that. And then I'm trying to build this business and know what I need in the business. And then you don't find out until you've already spent money. And then you have to just accept the sunken cost. And that's been big for me, because it's hard to believe that accepting this sunken cost will save you more money than just keeping it. But actually just keeping stuff wastes money. And that's been big change in mindset for me. Yeah. And then and then also just living in a beautiful home matters, and not just being strictly utilitarian. But that's so new to me. I don't know that I know how to talk about it that well. And that for me is like a lot of the dismissed feminine, and figuring out how to do that myself is just hard. I don't have well, it's hard to talk about. Maybe it's hard to do too. I don't know.
But
I'm gonna
maybe just say what you're doing instead of trying to figure out how.
Oh, you think I know?
You had an example with getting small teaspoons and then enchanting the wood of
Oh,
the kids.
well, I want my home to be a beautiful place for kids, and their experience. And so yeah, I have prisms in the windows, and I have brighter colors than I ever think I would have had. And then I have an assortment of fancy teacups and tiny spoons for little kids to have cocoa with. And I have lace curtains because of the shadow that they cast when the light comes through them. And yeah, trying to make a beautiful place, and kind of what Andrea in the Bangs was talking about with enchanting the world. I think it's actually important to do that. And I'm trying to figure out how, and it's a divergence from utilitarian living, because like, I really also see the beauty in like a sleeping mat and like 3 clean pairs of socks and living out of the back of your truck. But that's not the phase of life that I should be in right now. And so trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, do you feel like you kind of captured everything into the present?
Yeah, I think so.
So, when like I see a couple of themes popping out for me, right? Like one is effectively, like you said, being a little man, right? Like having this masculine spirit right on your shoulder your whole life, and now you're like, well, it's time for you to take a break and and embrace the feminine.
No, not just take a break, become part of the whole.
Hmm. Um, and then there's an aspect where the whole requires you to redeem the past in some sense, right? Like to draw out these pieces that were in a
Yeah.
place, but they were out of place in the place that they were in. Um, and being a mom, I think, is also a big new development for you, right? That's you were describing it as pulling yourself. Well, I don't know if you did actually, but that you get
Rick,
pulled out of yourself, right? And being the link between the two chains um, puts you in a different position. But I also feel that it gives you a way to look at yourself, which is maybe not colored by all the coloring that your parents or the army or your previous marriage, for example, had. Uh, like it's like a
yeah,
I don't want to
it's
use the word blank slate, but in some sense it is.
uh, it's hard to say who am I. That's difficult, but it's much. For some reason, it's clear for me to say, who do I want to be for my child? And I have more of an idea on who I want to be for my child than I do who I am. That's ambiguous. But I know there are certain things that I want to be for my child, and I can pursue them, and it's not a button mashing thing. It's a being thing. And that's harder, and also more worthwhile, because when you pursue being something versus doing something, as you become the person who can be, then you can do all the things better. And that's the sharpening the saw idea that I think is brought out in Atomic Habits. You have all these trees to chop down, and it's going to take you X amount of time to chop these trees down. But if you stop and spend X amount of time to sharpen the saw, then actually sharpening the saw will help you chop the trees down faster. And that's this whole pursuit, like proactively, not just happening, proactively being. And you can do that with your material world, getting your house in order. And actually, I think that's a great place to start, because you can't see the internal stuff necessarily, but you can see the effect of the eternal stuff on your environment. And that is your room, that is your space, that is your finances. And so, but it's like a layout, right? Like, so we have these layouts in the service, and like I'm kind of obsessed with them, because like I got the point of them way sooner than other people. Like, we have these layouts where you have this map of your closet, and it's like, you're going to put 6 socks on this shelf, and you're going to fold your underwear to this length, and you're going to put them all in a perfect row, and then you're going to do that with your t-shirts, and then your harnesses in this row, and your Kevlar in this row. And like, it's very exact. It's like everything within an inch has a place in this entire thing. And there's like 200 to 300 items, maybe less than that. Maybe there's like 150. I don't know. There's over 100 items. You got to have them all in the exact spot, and they're laid out. Well, the point of it is not about socks. The point of it is learning how to organize specifically, and the thing they have available is your stuff. Like, it has nothing to do, like, no one cares if your t-shirts and underwear are rolled. Like, no one cares. That's not the point. The point is learning how to do something that specifically, and the point is learning how to follow instructions that specifically, so that when you're on a radio and somebody tells you to take 2 batteries so you have 7 hours of talk time, you really do take 2 batteries, and you don't say to yourself, well, it'll be okay because these batteries are supposed to have 7 hour talk time per battery. No, no, no. If they tell you 2 batteries, they mean like, you know, and I see that connection with Peterson's stuff. I think the effect of cleaning your room should be on yourself or you've missed the point is really solid. And that's what I kind of mean by becoming yourself, like trying to not be as reactive, trying to be more proactive to what life hands you, and realizing that you don't just have to react to what's happening, you actually can become someone you want to be. And you probably have an idea of what that is, and then that idea should be reviewed because maybe it doesn't serve you well. Like, so talking about that with people you respect can help you. And there are ways to check and confirm and see more clearly your own vision of yourself. And that is a pursuit worth doing.
And you're definitely going to pursue that into the future.
Oh yeah, that's might be all
So
I pursue.
so if we take a jump 5 years into the future, Sally has made a perfect attempt at pursuing herself. What is Sally doing during a weekday?
I hope that it is so much more than I could imagine that there would be no way I can tell you. If everything that I am pretty much burns away into a better thing, that would be okay.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we can rephrase it is into what are you aiming at? So what's the direction that you're moving into?
Oh, you know that already, Manuel.
I
I'm here to build cool things.
well,
I
so
know you're satisfied with that answer, but I don't have a better aim. Yeah, no, I want to build beautiful things. And for myself, for my community, in between me and other people. And it's kind of banal, right? Oh, you want to build beautiful things, whatever. Well, it's best to God, really, when it comes down to it. It's like, I don't just want to do what's right. I don't want to just do what's good. I want to do that with excellence, with joy in it, with the relishing of life. And I want to do that for myself and for others.
mhm.
I want to build beautiful things.
So do you have an example of how that would look like?
Um, well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs first, kind of. I want to have my bases covered so well that I can make things and give them away and teach people. And so I have a freedom with my time to give it out where I want in a way that it doesn't degrade me. So step one is get my bases covered and be responsible and have myself taken care of so that I am not stressed, not strained, not wrecked with anxiety because I'm worried I'll lose everything for my kids and my family and my stability. And if I have that done, then I can really go up fast. So yeah, higher levels of maturity. That's the idea. And I really like the idea of revivifying as many things as possible. I'm sort of starting out with my buildings here. I'm trying to put out my ideas and my art in a way where if people decide they want it, it's available. But if no one wants it, it's not cluttering up the world. Also, I really like the print on demand product ideas because if no one wants it, it doesn't exist. And that's the fun things about making things online is if somebody finds that that is really giving them a connection, it's available at length. And if nobody wants to hear about it, they just don't have to click play. And I think that's so wonderful. Like, it's so wonderful. Like, I'm never speaking to an empty room. I just might not be speaking to right now. And I think one of the great things, it's so complicated because like people get on the internet because they're lonely, but also the internet relieves loneliness because you can share this internal world in a way that just couldn't be done. And I know that it's been good for me, and I hope that it's good for other people. Yeah.
So you're having all of these higher goals that are in some sense a dependency on what's happening. But for example, beautifying the world, is that a thing that's an individual striving, or is that a thing that you want to do in a group corporation?
I don't know how to do it as a group yet. I wouldn't be against doing it as a group. For now, I need to learn how to do it as myself. Um, I wouldn't hate doing it as a group. You can get lost in the sauce, right? Because are you cooperating or are you being lazy? Or are you taking charge or are you squishing other people's dreams? And I don't know if I'm mature enough to know the difference yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can work that out locally, maybe I can work that out higher up. It's just like I'd love to be able to help people en masse, but you can't give people money. It doesn't help them. So how do you do anything for people? I don't know yet. That's figuring it out. I found one of the best ways to genuinely help people in my immediate sphere is to succeed, which is mind-boggling, right? That's totally not the way I thought life was. I thought the best way to help people was to sacrifice utterly at your own cost. But actually it's not. Actually it's not, especially not for the people that love you. And so learning how to unapologetically succeed to benefit people in my immediate spheres in a gracious way is the dance I'm trying to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the success thing is a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yes.
That's
Well, because okay, like, so Peterson is better because Peterson wears oil tycoon suits and has made money doing the right thing. It's actually better because this craven impulse to present yourself like a pauper is just wrong. It's wrong. It's not excellence. Like some people should do it, right? Like probably like the Dalai Lama and Buddha, like there are people where that's their thing. That's what they should do. But not everyone. Like Peterson is the first person that made me understand why anyone would ever want to give tribute to a king. And I understood it and it reoriented my whole world. Peterson is probably a reason that I did my great distribution where I gave away a bunch of my artwork because I realized I want to give the best thing to this person because the best thing that I could produce going to this person would be its maximum use. And like, I get it. I get hierarchies. I get royalty. I get it. Like, yeah, it's not technically a bad idea to have one family of people where all they do is study history and decorum and rule a country. And I never understood that before Peterson. Like, I get it, man. And now I see that purposefully giving away wealth and purposefully not pursuing success, and it wouldn't have to be with money, right? You could have success as a pastor, you could have success as an athlete, you could have success, like there's lots and lots, you could just have success as a grandparent, like, but there's lots of these successes. But I always saw that I could take it and win. And I always would get right about there and let it go. And there were more than one reason for that. One of it was I wasn't being integrated and I was pursuing these narrow versions of myself that weren't my whole self. So to an extent, like I just didn't have the will to take it, right? Like, because it wasn't really what I wanted. But now I'm trying to bring myself back together and I'm seeing the possibility for real, like basic success in a couple of ways. And I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it and I'm going to use it absolutely as well as I can possibly use it. And I hope that allows me to employ people. I hope that allows me to take things that have been useless and make them useful. I hope that allows me to tell beautiful stories that inspire the soul. That's my dream for any amount of success that I have. That's what I want to do with it. But if you're not willing to take it, then you're cheating yourself and you're cheating the world. And I think I did that for a long time. And I'm done doing that.
That's one thing that you're striving for, taking what you deserve.
No, it's not deserve. It's what I could do. It's not a deserving thing. I don't think I'm entitled at all. But I think that I could do it. I think I am capable. In fact, I knew I was capable. And I always thought, oh yeah, I could do that. But, you know, that's arrogant anyway. So why bother? And now that I have seen clearly how it affects people around me, I know that I will. And in fact, I know that I must, or I will always be less than myself. And that's what I mean by becoming myself, is like, I know myself can be this thing that's bigger. And not like in a egotistical kind of way, but like I just know it's like a garden. Like if you have a beautiful garden and you don't weed it and then your crops don't produce, you've cheated yourself. And your soul is your garden. Like your mind is your garden, your body is your garden. And you could treat it well and you could water it and you could weed it and you could do the work and it could produce. And if you don't do that, yeah, maybe nobody will bother you, maybe nobody will starve to death, but you're not helping the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give it my best go at becoming myself.
So when you were talking about the queen or the king, right, and honoring them, it's partaking in some of their glory in some sense. So
yeah, giving tribute to the highest and offering up the king and the queen the best of your works elevates you.
Well, keep going. Like no, elevates you how? Like elevates you by participating in the highest, or it elevates you by?
I mean, giving your best to God elevates you, but also like I'm not saying you should go out and find a king and give him tribute. Maybe. But like doing your best and making your best thing and putting it in the back of a closet will not do as well for you as giving it to a king. Nor the king, nor the kingdom, nor the people you engage with. Like if you do your best and then you try and hide it in a closet, that's putting your light under the bushel. No.
So I wanted to go a place from honoring the king, because like that's a big hierarchy, but you have lesser hierarchies.
Yeah. That's just the ideal of it, right? Like there's definitely go with whatever's available. Like go with what's immediate. And that's what I decided with my distribution of my artwork. I didn't end up because I had this idea about my artwork, and especially my 4 core pieces from art school that were sort of like my thesis work. I was like, who could I give them to that I would be really happy to give them to. And at first it was like Donald Trump, or no, not Donald Trump, but like Elon Musk, or like all the way up, What's the hierarchy? And like it was just crazy. Like it was like Joe Rogan. Like I just went full, and then like that didn't really seem attainable. I didn't know how I would do that, and I rolled it back, and then it was like, oh, who commented on my video that seemed to understand the piece? Oh, that person commented on the video and understood the piece. And then very, very quickly, I was able to make decisions about where my artwork should go. And that was more satisfying than trying to keep them and put them in a gallery. That's a gallery of one, right? And like the whole point of individual expressions of emotion is to, because another person's probably felt it and known it. And then that breaks isolation between people. And I think that is the really good place of art, or at least my art, is that the artist gives up a piece of their internal privacy to the world to break up loneliness, because other people have it too, and not everyone gets the privilege of sharing that, because it's a sacrifice to share that, because you make yourself vulnerable in a way that many people in many types of careers and family situations and stuff can't risk. And as an artist, you risk it for everyone. And so when I started giving out my work to people I knew it resonated with, it's a gallery of one. And in that gallery of one, probably more benefit comes from my work than it being in a big gallery, or than it being sold, or than me keeping it all. Certainly better than it going to a closet. And that was a revolution for me and how I was going to do my art. And I don't know that I'll ever go back to selling originals. I think I'll give away originals and I'll sell reproductions if people want them. And yeah, it's a crazy world.
So how would you say that? Is that like a sliver of shared reality? Like what's the connection that you're making to that person?
When it seems to happen, I'll paint something that is my own experience. And with the right people, with the right groups of people, some people like, oh, I've been there. And they know it immediately. I had a piece that I called Alone, and it was a person on a floating island in a snowstorm. And the sun is hazed over. And people would tell me they've been there too. That's crazy. None of us have been there. Islands don't float. But psychologically, the ground is a way to express reality, and the figure is a way to express yourself. And so I do a lot with just shapes of ground and lone figures. And when people see it, they know that emotion, and it's a relief, because it's like a crack right through the soul that tells you, like, it's like, oh, this person was in that level of feel. Like it might not have been the same as yours, but they see the level of intensity through that, by the remaking of an image language that's like a little bit past what can be verbally articulated with words. And then also it's an international language, which is really exciting, because ground and boats and people and roofs, and like there's certain forms that really, really transcend culture. Not everything, right? But I really do like to pare down to nearly like past culture stuff. Although I do use jeans and a t-shirt to express the everyday man, and I know that is specifically American, but I figure that's the American version of the Roman toga. I do.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your purpose with your art then. And then there was this other idea that you're playing with creating spaces for people. Do you have a sense of how you would develop that?
I see an opportunity in weird unused buildings, because they are part of what build places, and I would like to see them preferably revivified, but if not revivified, destroyed, because I think hollowed out buildings that have not been cared for degrade the soul. And because America's history is so much younger, I think we have trouble deciding what to keep and what not to keep. And places too much gets wiped out, and places too much gets clunged onto as a resistance to too much getting wiped out. And so if we're going to cling on to a recent past, then it needs to be revivified, and there needs to be new life in it, and it needs to be made into something that can be used. Also, there is a American impulse for bigger, better, grander that has gotten, it no longer serves us, and houses are too big and people can't afford them, and the whole housing crisis stuff. And I would like to see available structures reworked in a way that promotes community and home and affordability and just uplifting people. And maybe I've always loved spaces. Maybe I've always been a little obsessed with them. I remember even very much loving military barracks and imagining a world where people could actually inhabit them and not be pushed in and out of them quickly, but you are. And so finding a way to do that in the world, it's not something when I was younger and I was imagining like my optimal self, I never thought to myself, oh, I'll find new buildings and I'll renovate them. But it seems to be an amalgamation of the many parts of me, because it takes a certain amount of just gritty diligence that I have experience in from the service, and it takes a bit of higher figuring things out that my analyst work, I actually can sit down with several hundred pages and know what it says to an extent enough to use it. And then it takes art, because the things that need done are things that no one has thought of, and given time and energy, I can usually think of a new idea. And so I have the ideas, I have the technical knowledge, and I have the stamina. I probably can do it. Will I figure out the physical money? We'll find out. I've
Well, we're
tried.
talking about an ideal future, so
Yeah. No,
that's not a worry there.
everything works. I develop a system of splitting up old buildings into affordable suites that promote community, and maybe even establish them on a rent-to-own basis for local proprietors. Do I know how to do that right now? No. I'm just running at it as fast as I can.
And I think the third category that I assigned was motherhood, right? Being a mom. So if we're talking about your lessons from becoming your real self, how are you gonna like transmit that? Like, is there a way that you can facilitate that for your children?
I want to be strict enough there's structure, and moderated and tolerant enough my kid can talk to me at the same time. And I maybe have other goals, but those two supersede. Also, I want to be dignified in a way that my child is not embarrassed of me. As much as I can. I know that might be unattainable, especially for teens, because I think they just find a way to be embarrassed of their parents. But I want to be sure that I'm doing the things I can do to be dignified for my child. And it's a delicate balance of that, right? Because like I am a artist on the internet and I want to be like raw and fun, but I do consider everyone watching every video. And like there are risks I take. And I pretty much do not delete. So like that decision has been made before I put it out. Because I think keeping the numbered journey, the way Joe Rogan keeps the numbered journey, is essential to the authenticity of putting up video content. But yeah, I hope I'm making a good balance with that. And I assume I'll probably get better at it. I hope. But yeah.
So are there life lessons that you learned that you're like, oh, I need to communicate this, and you have a sense of how to do that?
Yeah. Like one of the big ones is there are certain social games and it's okay to play them and it's okay to try and win. I've used schooling, like public schooling especially, but schooling in general is a game. It's a social game. You can win it. It's not about the school. It's about the game. It's about playing the game well. And I hope I can communicate that, and that's not necessarily like that's not bad. That's just a way to live in humanity. Like there's certain things you do to get along with society, and that's okay, but you don't have to be limited by them. So just because everybody thinks a thing, you don't have to do it. But then also know you can do it to get the benefit if you choose to. And I was unbalanced at that. I was just like, no, I don't have to. That's stupid. Society's stupid. And like, it is. But not knowing that I could have played to win was not good for me. So I want to promote that. And generally eating healthy and trying with your food and trying to be fit so you don't have to needlessly suffer. That's something that I'm trying to do for myself and for my child. Literature, I want to promote good stories. I want him to read all of the old books. Yeah, and like I'm purposely making sure he has social opportunities that weren't quite there. And it's really wonderful too, because me making sure he has social opportunities also is a social opportunity for other kids in his sphere. So I'm not just enriching his life by making sure I do that. I'm finding myself taking my son to go visit families, and then I end up having conversations with the older kids in that family. So I'm being part of their lives and they're being part of his lives. And that is really magic thing. And then just thinking about as I get older, watching these wonderful people grow. And that was a joy to life I was utterly missing. And yeah, I would recommend to everyone, like, go meet kids. Like, even if you are the most like don't like to meet kids, if you have any kids in your family, go meet them, because it won't be them for that hour. It won't be them for that week or that month or that year, but it will be them over time. That is so magic. And your percentage of their life is so high. Because if a kid is 3 years old and you spend 4 hours with them one holiday playing a board game, that is such a high percentage of their life. So you are this like concentrated drink to them. It's amazing. It's so amazing. And like all my time I lived away from home, just, everything else seems pointless in comparison to interactions with younger people. Like, yeah.
Well, that sounds like a nice note to end us on.
Okay.
So, yeah, do you have anything else to add?
No, it's good. I'm glad you're doing this channel. I'm glad you're making it a point to talk about people's journeys. I think that's a beautiful thing.
So, what's the lesson that you took from
A lesson?
yeah, like or the insight
A
by
lesson
talking?
conversation or a lesson in general?
Well, from the conversation, but you can do a lesson in general as well.
I don't know if I can pair one out for you.
That's fair.
I
Well,
have to think for a while. Like, yeah.
well, you don't have to answer. It's just a question.
Okay.
If you don't have it, you don't have it. So I hope the
I,
audience has it for you, so that you can use their lessons.
tell me in the comments what I learned so Manuel can be satiated. There we go.
Exactly. Well, um, and yeah, so thank you for being my guest. It was really nice. And everybody else, thank you for watching. And I hope to see you again for the next episode of Unfolding the Soul.